Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
My sister Ruby, she killed herself. She killed her son. She killed her son too.
Two people are dead, the mom and the son?
Yes.
This 911 call triggered a twisted investigation into a case so shocking that no one could predict the ending. On July 26, 2006, Tori Viano and her 9-month-old baby Dean were found to death. The crime scene was so gruesome, it left the police horrified.
It looked like a sexual assault. Her blouse was pulled open, her bra was ripped open, her pants were pulled down a little bit, and she had a towel draped over her.
The scene was unsettling, but something didn't sit well.
It's clearly very personal. Even hardened criminals, for the most part, aren't interested in hurting little kids. Tori's roommate, Trish, thought maybe it was a murder-suicide, but the strangulation was not like someone hanging themselves. Someone else strangled her.
This revealed a new twist. Everything was staged. As detectives dug deeper, dark secrets surfaced, exposing a killer who believed he had executed the perfect murder. Police arrived at the apartment complex at approximately 8:54 p.m. in response to Trish's frantic call. She detailed the horrifying scene inside and guided them to the third-floor apartment. Upon entering the apartment, the officers found no evidence of forced entry or tampering. As they approached Tori's body, they saw a haunting sight: a cord tightly wrapped around her neck about 4 times. It immediately became apparent that Tori was not breathing, and the disturbing part was that the cord was so deeply embedded into her neck that it was clear she'd been strangled. The scene had only begun to reveal its twisted secrets. Detectives observed that one of Tori's legs was exposed, while the other was partially covered by her jeans. Her underwear had been pulled down to her knees. Although her blouse was torn, her bra remained intact. At this point, detectives concluded that Tori had been murdered, and it wasn't an act of self-harm.
In my experience, if you murder somebody and you know this person and you later have some kind of remorse, frequently they cover that person with a towel or a blanket. It's like a form of burying. I don't want to see what I've done.
Drawing his revolver, one of the detectives cautiously searched the apartment for any potential suspects or additional victims. When he opened the door to the darkened room, he stumbled upon a chilling scene that no one could have prepared him for. A lifeless infant lying in his playpen, a telephone cord cruelly wrapped around his neck 4 times. This was Tori's 9-month-old son, Dean. The discovery of an innocent child cruelly strangled took the horror to an unimaginable level. San Diego police detectives conducted a thorough investigation of the crime scene. They theorized that the perpetrator must have most likely entered through the main entrance.
There was no signs of forced entry in the house. Now, she lives in the 3rd-story apartment. There's no trees, there's no balcony, there's nowhere someone could climb up and go into the window. That indicates to us there's an acquaintance there, someone she feels comfortable with.
Given the apartment's 3rd-floor location with a sheer drop, it was impossible for anyone to have gained access through a window. Near Tori's body, they discovered a diaper bag filled with diapers and other personal items. Her cell phone and some belongings were scattered about a foot away. Despite the tragic scene, there were no signs of a struggle. The living room was meticulously organized, save for a small child's stool that had been knocked over. These details eventually led detectives to realize that Tori's attacker had staged the scene to make it appear as though she'd been assaulted. The illusion of sexual violence was carefully crafted, but the truth seemed to be far more sinister. Detectives discovered blood on Tori's head, but none on her hands or feet. Additionally, there were no defensive wounds on her hands or forearms, suggesting she didn't fight back against her attacker. Every clue pointed not to a struggle, but to a cold and calculated act, one that left the investigators questioning everything they thought they knew about the killer's motives. The autopsy report revealed the full extent of the horrors that Tori and Dean endured and provided an insight into their tragic deaths. During the autopsy, Dr. Wagner, a forensic pathologist, discovered a blunt force injury near Tori's left ear. He found bleeding in her brain from 2 impact areas, suggesting that a blunt object had caused the laceration, while a body part, such as a fist, hand, or knee, had likely caused the contusion. Wagner also found blunt force trauma to the front of Tori's head. The presence of petechia, which are small pinpoint hemorrhages on Tori's face, indicated that she was alive when the ligature had been wrapped around her neck. This was determined since petechia can mainly occur when small blood vessels under the skin rupture due to intense pressure. These tiny marks told a story of suffering, one that unfolded in her final moments. Additionally, Wagner found no evidence that Tori fought back or was conscious when she'd begun to bleed, concluding that the blunt force injuries rendered her unconscious. She had already been slipping away when the killer made his final, fatal move. He believed she was either placed against the couch or had fallen there, where she'd been subsequently strangled. Wagner testified that the condition of Tori's clothing initially suggested she'd been the victim of an attempted sexual assault. However, the physical examination revealed no evidence to support such an attack. Based on the medical evidence, it was determined that Dean's attacker had cruelly placed the electrical cord around his neck while he stood helpless in the playpen, so tightly that he couldn't even sit. As time passed, the exhausted child eventually sat down, unknowingly tightening the cord around his neck. Tragically, this caused him to hang from the cord, leading to his suffocation and death. The innocence of a child turned into a nightmarish scene, one that could have only been orchestrated by a truly disturbed mind. With the physical evidence in place, it was time to gather testimonies from those closest to the victims. When investigators interviewed Tricia, she explained that she'd returned home at 1 p.m. on the day of the murders, finding Tori and her son Dean already there. Around 7 p.m., she'd seen Tori sitting motionless on the floor, partially covered by a blanket. Tricia had then returned to her room and left to get gas. Upon her return, she found Tori still in the same position, and upon closer inspection, she noticed something strange, that there was a red spot on the couch. What she saw next would forever haunt her, an image that was more than just a spot. It was a sign of the horrors that had happened. Tricia lifted the blanket and discovered the cord of her hair-straightening iron wrapped tightly around Tori's neck. She rushed to check on Dean, but what she saw made her heart sink. Dean was lifeless too. His small body lay still in the playpen, his hands and legs unmoving. His face had taken on a faint shade of blue, and in that moment, her worst fear came true. The vicious nature of the scene left investigators puzzled, struggling to find any immediate leads. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that this was far from a random act of violence, and it would soon reveal ties to a dark and disturbing history, one that was far from over, buried for too long. Just as police were at a loss, the case took a dramatic turn with the discovery of a connection to the victim's ex-boyfriend, Dennis Potts. Detectives wasted no time, and in the early morning of July 27, 2006, around 2:45 a.m., San Diego police homicide detectives arrived at the Potts family home to question Potts. Before approaching him, the detectives informally agreed not to reveal that Dean had also been murdered. Police thought the omission of this vital detail would test Potts's reaction, revealing more than words ever could. During the interview, Potts informed the detectives of his long-standing friendship with Tori and their past physical intimacy.
We had learned that she was going to go out on a date with Dennis Potts, and that was her former boyfriend. Dennis Potts was interviewed at the very beginning of the investigation. He was like, oh, yeah, I know who she is. Yeah, we have a history, but I haven't seen her in a long time. And, there was some banter about going out, but there was no date.
What he called a friendship, the detectives saw as a complicated entanglement, one that could have led to deadly consequences. Potts and Tori had dated briefly during their senior year of high school. After their breakup, Potts had started dating another classmate. But despite having a new girlfriend, Potts and Tori continued to see each other and engaged in physical intimacy several times for about 6 months after graduation. However, their interactions became less frequent in the beginning of 2003. In 2004, Tori moved in with her then-boyfriend, Neil Springstube, and his roommate, Daniel Moen. In December 2004, Tori and Potts had what he claimed was their final physical encounter. Early in 2005, Tori texted Potts, informing him that she was pregnant with Neil's child. Later that year, she gave birth to a son named Dean. After talking to the detective about the past, Potts claimed that he'd seen Tori on July 20th when they discussed meeting up after his return from Las Vegas. He admitted to deleting their text messages from the previous day to avoid his fiancée's scrutiny. While Potts insisted they hadn't made concrete dinner plans, he did acknowledge a casual discussion about hanging out. However, when pressed, he vehemently denied any such arrangements. The more he denied, the deeper the suspicions grew. Potts alleged that Tori had changed her mind the night before and canceled the plan. Detectives noticed an even more disturbing aspect. Throughout the 20-minute conversation, Potts never once inquired about Dean's well-being. In the midst of discussing a gruesome murder, the absence of concern spoke volumes.
He said that he had spent the time frame that would include the time of the murder between 5 in the afternoon and 8 in the evening at a friend's house, a fellow by the name of Max Korn. He vouched for him.
Potts mentioned that he'd been with his friend Max Korn at the time of the murders, which made it impossible for him to have been at the house with Tori. Max confirmed this alibi, which cleared Potts from the suspect list. After verifying this, the investigators turned their focus to a new suspect. Just when the pieces seemed to fit, the puzzle changed. Their gaze now turned to Neil Springstube, Tori's more recent ex-boyfriend. When they interviewed Neil, he disclosed a deeply troubling aspect of his relationship with Tori.
Dean was about 5 months, and Neil's family wanted him to have a paternity test. Tori told me the day that Dean was born. I don't know how to fill out the birth certificate. And she told me there was a possibility that Neil was not Dean's father.
Neil confessed that upon discovering Tori had cheated on him with Potts, he'd been devastated and became highly suspicious about the paternity of her baby Dean. In the spring of 2006, Neil decided to submit a DNA sample to confirm if he was Dean's father. But nothing could prepare him for the results that would shatter his world and plant seeds of anger and despair. The test results revealed that he was not the father. Reeling from the betrayal and the paternity shock, Neil left Tori and moved to Florida.
I got a call from Tori, and she told me that Neil was going to Florida to get his head together. And I said, "Is he coming back?" And she said, "I don't know."
But the distance didn't erase the pain, and in the eyes of the detectives, it didn't erase the potential for revenge either. Tori also wanted to confirm if Potts was the father of her babies, since they'd been involved in an affair around the time of her conceiving Dean.
We did 2 tests. One where I swabbed myself, swabbed the baby, and one where she swabbed me and the baby. I opened the envelopes fresh in front of her, and I sealed them up in front of her, and then mailed them out. Came back, you're not the dad.
Devastated by this news, she lost all hope. To keep her baby safe, she temporarily moved in with Tricia for a month, sharing an apartment with her sister Autumn and Autumn's 2 children at the time of the murders. Now, in the eyes of the detectives, Neil had a clear motive. This was a man who had just found out that the son he'd raised as his own for months and loved dearly was not his blood. They suspected he might have felt cheated and betrayed, and to avenge his trauma, he chose to kill both Tori and Dean. But Neil firmly denied any involvement in the murder, asserting that he'd been out of state during the crime. His employer verified his alibi, confirming his presence at work on the day of the murders. As the investigation continued, each new suspect brought with them a web of complex revelations. With Neil out of the picture, the stage was set for a closer relationship between Tori, her son Dean, and another key figure, Daniel Moen. The shift in living arrangements led to Moen becoming a more central figure in Tori and Dean's lives. Moen frequently babysat Dean while Tori was at work. He had later even cared for him for a week in the spring of 2006 when Tori traveled to Florida in an unsuccessful attempt to reconcile with Neil. Upon her return, Tori and Moen decided to move out of their current apartment, which further solidified Moen's role in their lives.
Daniel Moen was probably her best male friend. He was sort of like a babysitter, but more so, almost like a nanny. He always had a crush on Tori. Mr. Moen finally gets to that stage where he has sex with a girl he's pined for months. I think he intended for her to be his girlfriend.
As the investigation deepened, tensions escalated, and new evidence began to surface. Then police also found surveillance footage that revealed crucial insights into Moen's activities on the night of the murders. Footage from a store had captured Moen's presence from 6:43 p.m. onwards until the store closed. Later that night, Moen received a call from Autumn, who mistakenly informed him that Tori had killed Dean and herself. Upon hearing this devastating news, Moen contacted his store manager for early permission to close. He had then called his brother, who met him outside the apartment where Tori and Dean had been tragically found dead. John Young, a detective with the San Diego Police Department's homicide unit, interviewed Moen at the crime scene on the night of the murders. Moen informed Young that he'd started work at 2 p.m. the previous day. This information was corroborated by 2 other employees who had worked alongside Moen on the day of the murders. A few days later, Moen contacted Young to share that he'd left the store around 5:20 p.m. for approximately 10 to 15 minutes on the evening of the murders. In light of this new information, Detective Young analyzed the store's surveillance video and discovered that Moen was indeed inside the store working at 6:53 p.m. This was the exact time he'd received the final text message from Tori's phone where she mentioned wanting to meet him after canceling plans with Potts. They calculated that the distance between Moen's workplace and Tori's apartment was approximately 10 miles each way, requiring a round-trip commute of at least 35 minutes.
We found that it would have been physically impossible for Danny Moen to have enough time to drive there, commit these acts, and then get back to work in time.
Given that Moen was at work at 6:53 p.m. when he received the final text from Tori's phone, and Tori's phone was discovered near her body within the apartment, they concluded that Moen could not have been the murderer. With all suspects having alibis, yet solid motives for the murder, the police hit a dead end. However, they finally received the warrant to search Tori's phone, leading to a breakthrough in the case. Inside the phone, investigators discovered a series of texts between Tori and Daniel Moen on the day of the murders. The messages discussed a plan for a date, which added a new layer of mystery to the investigation. At 5:50 p.m. on the evening of the murders, Moen had texted Tori an apology for his harsh behavior earlier. Moen later explained that this text had been in response to a 6-minute phone conversation they had earlier, during which he conveyed his disapproval of Potts' contact with Dean. Moen later received a series of texts from Tori's phone that he found suspicious and unusual. At 6:10 p.m., he got a message saying, "Dean is sleeping like a dead dog."
Dean was sleeping like a dead dog.
She said that Dean was sleeping like a dead dog?
Yeah.
Was that the way she talked?
No, not at all.
Then at 6:27 p.m., Tori texted that she'd canceled on Dennis Potts and invited Moen to come over after work. When Moen asked the reason for the same, Tori replied that she didn't want to see him. The last text Moen received from Tori's phone was at 6:53 p.m. and read, "There's a creepy guy standing by my car staring into my place." Moen texted Tori back at 7:05 p.m. "Yikes, what time was he coming?" Then at 7:09 p.m., he texted again asking, "Is the guy still there?" At 7:19 p.m., he texted, "You there?" An hour later, Moen tried calling Tori, but no one answered. The next message Moen received was from Autumn, informing him about the murders. Moen said that Tori would never describe Dean as sleeping like a dead dog and wouldn't refer to Autumn's apartment as my place. He emphasized that Tori appreciated Autumn's kindness in letting them stay there temporarily, as Autumn was the one paying the rent. Moen pointed out to detectives a suspicious message Tori had sent where she used the word duh. He explained that in their 6 years of texting, Tori had never used that word before, which immediately stood out to him as unusual.
And then this text is crucial. Tori's phone back to Daniel Moen, 3 letters, duh, D-U-H. All of Tori's friends, Daniel Moen, that's not a word she would use.
These suspicious details exposed a dark secret that someone else had taken control of Tori's phone. As the investigation progressed, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source: the recovered texts on Tori's phone. Digital forensics experts managed to recover deleted messages, which helped shed new light on the case. These newly uncovered texts revealed a shocking dimension to the investigation. One crucial message, dated July 25, 2006, surfaced from Potts to Tori, which exposed Potts' underlying jealousy and concerns. But it wasn't just one message that changed everything. A criminal investigator for the prosecution revealed that he reviewed the text message data from Tori's phone and found 26 messages, including deleted ones, exchanged between Potts and Tori on the day of the murders. At 4:32 p.m., Tori texted Potts asking if he was still coming. Potts responded a minute later saying, "Duh, I'll be there at 5:15. You home alone?" Tori replied, "Yeah, just Dean and I. Is my surprise good?" Potts responded, "Yes, it'll be in my car. Where's Autumn's sister?" Tori replied, "I'm not sure. What did you want to tell me?" Potts responded, "Baby, relax. It's not. Just smile and wait for me to come over and be extra nice to me. I'll call you when I'm almost there." Tori replied, "Okay." The phone records indicated a phone call from Potts to Tori at 5:39 p.m. on the evening of the murders. As detectives looked deeper into the implications of these texts, the investigation took a new turn, raising questions about the true nature of Potts's visit and his role in the tragedy. The texts were now more than just communication. They were a window into the motives and intentions that could make or break the case. Now, with all eyes on Dennis Potts, the interrogation began.
You had mentioned to us that you talked to Tori about five or so that
Five or
night?
so-ish, yes.
Okay. You called her or she called you?
I called her. Yeah, definitely called her.
And then what did you guys talk about?
That's really, she wanted to get together on that night. We had talked about it earlier in the week, or last week.
Okay.
I called her and I'm like, what's going on? And she was like, I'm going to text message Daniel and see if he wants to hang out after he gets off of work.
Wait a minute.
That was pretty much the extent of it.
Okay, earlier you said she wanted to hang out that night.
We had talked. We had talked about it.
So you guys didn't have any plans per se?
Oh no, nothing set in stone. Absolutely not. No, absolutely not.
He claimed that he'd been out that night and that while he and Tori were supposed to meet, there were no solid plans made. When questioned about the paternity controversy surrounding Dean, Potts responded to the detectives with unsettling confidence.
We did 2 tests. One where I swabbed myself, swabbed the baby, and one where she swabbed me and the baby. I opened the envelopes fresh in front of her, and I sealed them up in front of her, and then mailed them out. Came back, you're not the dad.
After this, the detectives made a request which would totally change the course of action in this disturbing case.
Real simple.
A swab, okay.
Yeah.
I was expecting a nurse.
Now, if I compare this to Dean, if I compare what we just did here to Dean, what you going to tell me?
Same thing that our paternity test did. And if not, I'm going to be surprised. Really, sincerely surprised, yes.
The results were shocking. Dennis Potts was indeed Dean's father. He'd previously faked his old DNA report to hide the truth from his new girlfriend. Potts's motive was clear. He didn't want his new relationship to be compromised due to his past with Tori. Next, investigators turned their attention to Potts's phone. They discovered that Potts's phone calls were routed through cell tower 814 between 5 p.m. and 8 p.m. on the day of the murders, with one exception, a call at 6:44 p.m. which routed through cell tower 425. This cell tower was approximately 0.6 miles away from the murder scene. According to a senior engineer, it was nearly impossible for Potts to have received that call at his home, as it would have been routed through cell towers 814 or 357 instead. They also recovered deleted text messages between Potts and Tori from the day of the murder.
One of the first messages on her phone was at 6:27 p.m. But interestingly, all the messages before that were erased, and the question sort of became why. And what we came to learn is that Dennis had deleted a lot of the messages because they dealt with the meeting, the fact that they were planning to go out and what she was going to wear and when they were going to meet and the babysitter. So all of those were deleted.
These messages confirmed that Tori and Potts had indeed planned to meet and had set a specific time. It became evident that the messages exchanged after this meeting time had been falsified by Potts. A search of Potts's house revealed disturbing Google search history. Terms like committing murder, how to cheat a swab paternity test, the best way to kill someone, getting out of child support, and performing a chokehold had been searched in the weeks leading up to Tori's death.
And, for us, obviously, the fact that on July 19th, he was Googling how to kill someone and performing chokehold, both of our deceased in this case were strangled. This told us a lot about Dennis Pott's mind.
The investigation, now pointing decisively towards Potts, uncovered a tangled web of deceit, motive, and opportunity. Potts was Tori's on-again, off-again boyfriend and the father of her child, which he tried to hide from everyone with a fake paternity test. But now, with a fiancée and a new life, he was desperate to erase his past. Terrified that the paternity test would expose him, he made a chilling decision, one that would leave no loose ends. He searched online for ways to murder and stage the perfect crime scene. That fateful day, he convinced Tori it was a date, walking into her home with a sinister plan. With no one there except Tori and their innocent child, Potts brought forth his darkest side. In an act of pure evil, he strangled Tori and Dean, silencing them forever. Then, in a cold, calculated move, he texted from her phone, trying to frame Moen and shift the blame. But no matter how much Potts tried to hide his monstrous crime, the truth clawed its way to the surface. His mask of a loyal boyfriend fell off and revealed the terrible killer beneath. Tori Vienno's and Dean's lives were tragically cut short by a heinous act of violence. But justice was finally served when their killer, Dennis Potts, was brought to justice. On January 16, 2008, Potts and his accomplice, Max Korn, who lied about his alibi, were arrested and charged with the murders of Tori and Dean. Potts was ultimately found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole.
The judge gave him what they call double life without parole. So in other words, he has to do 2 life terms. There's no chance for parole whatsoever, so he'll obviously die in prison.
Korn received a 3-year prison sentence for his role in obstructing justice. But the story didn't end with the sentencing. In a powerful gesture, the judge granted Tori's mother, Rose Vienno, a request that would forever remind Potts of his crimes. A haunting photograph of Tori and Dean together in their casket was ordered to be hung on the wall of Potts's prison cell for the rest of his life. This haunting reminder was a fitting punishment for the cruelty Potts had inflicted. Rose Vienno, left devastated by the loss of her daughter and grandson, became a dedicated advocate for victims of crime. Before ending the video, we want to express our heartfelt condolences to the Vienno family and all those who love Tori and little Dean. The loss of a young mother and her innocent child is truly heartbreaking. We can only hope that, in time, they find some healing in the memories of the love they shared. Thank you for watching. We hope you found this video both informative and thought-provoking. Please drop a comment below and let us know which case you'd like us to cover next.